Hey everyone, it's Michelle with the Medicine Couch, and some of you may know I recently started early this year working as a hospitalist. I'm just working PRN, but I've been thinking about doing a video talking about the differences between inpatient and outpatient because they've kind of been striking me a lot as I've been doing this work. And then I saw that a viewer was asking if I would share my thoughts on inpatient versus outpatient. So thank you, Maria, for that prompt to get me to make this video. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about this transition I just made, kind of what we're doing and how the setup is in the hospital I'm working in, and then give some of my thoughts about inpatient versus outpatient, and at the end tell you whether I like inpatient better or whether I wish I would have stuck with outpatient. So I transitioned into this hospital because I have a good friend working there, and he's been talking to me about coming working as a hospitalist. But they work 7 12-hour shifts in a row, so they do the 7 on and 7 off. And I told him, I'm far too old for that. I don't want to do that. And so I was fortunate that I was able to come on and be trained to work PRN, and I won't have to work the 7 12-hour shifts in a row. And one of the main reasons that I accepted this position is that they assured me there was going to be training, a decent onboarding. It ended up being just a little shy of 6 weeks of training, and it definitely helped a lot. I would not go from outpatient to inpatient if you were not going to be given that time to learn. So if you were thinking about making this transition at all, please make sure that your hospital is going to offer you a good amount of onboarding time where you're going to be working with other providers, helping you and teaching you through the process and letting you slowly increase your patient count. So speaking of patient count, you may be wondering what we do and how many patients we see. So in this particular setting I'm working in, the PAs and NPs only do admits during the day. We're not doing rounding on any patients, and we're expected to admit between 8 to 10 patients a day. Still haven't quite got there. 6 has been my limit. 7 is just right around the corner. So it does take some time to get up to speed in what you're doing. And trust me, there are just so many things that are different about inpatient and outpatient medicine. Some of those are just dealing with things that you never deal with in an outpatient setting normally, like fluids. And it's not just giving fluids, you have to know which fluids to give and in which situation. So that's been difficult. Working with higher acuity patients than I'm used to, where things can go south in a hurry, and you really have to make sure you're kind of on top of things and anticipating what can happen, and dealing with acid-base disorders. Never really dealt with that in outpatient. I remember learning about it and happily put that out of my head, but now I'm having to go back and really try to understand those and understand all the nuances that go with it. And then just general things like how the hospital works, especially when it comes to nursing. There's things I just don't really understand, like what do they kind of automatically do versus the things that I have to make sure I'm writing specific orders for, and just understanding how you order different things. Even things as simple as like ordering a diet, ordering what they're going to eat in the hospital gets difficult, whether you think that they're going to need to be NPO or not. But then you have to also, they have lots of different choices for diet, and some people get fed through like a G tube or something. So there's a lot more intricacies there than you realize when you come from outpatient to inpatient. Another thing that I'm finding challenging working in the inpatient setting is that you're kind of not your own, I don't want to say your own boss, but when I've worked in outpatient settings before, pretty much I saw my patients, I made decisions, I went and asked physicians when I had questions, but for every patient, I was the one making the decisions and making the plan and formulating in my head, putting it on paper and explaining to the patient, and that's it. But in the hospital setting, it's different, especially the way that this hospital is set up. We are paired with a physician for every patient that we see. And so you have to take into account that physician's particular preferences for different medications, different fluids, how aggressive they like to be or how conservative they like to treat. So you have to temper your practice to what they want. I mean, obviously, we can talk to them about, thoughts we have and suggestions that we have, but it's ultimately the physician's decision, and you're pretty much just going to have to practice how that physician wants to practice. And so that can be a little frustrating at times and makes me wonder a little bit about liability. And you have to think about that when you're writing your notes, how you word things, especially if it's something that you have a real difference of opinion on. Of course, I'm so new into the inpatient setting that hasn't really come up, but I imagine as time goes by that there would be things that you really don't, not necessarily you don't agree with, but that you think would be better done a different way. And so that can cause some conflicts and some problems. I also think about being sued more in the inpatient setting than I ever did in the outpatient, mostly just because of the acuity of the patients that you're working with, and that there's a lot more immediate things that can go wrong, or if you miss something, could have more disastrous consequences than in the outpatient setting. So if that makes you nervous, that's something to definitely consider if you're looking at inpatient. Another challenge that I've had that I didn't think about was that it's just harder to do a physical exam, right, on these patients. They're lying in a bed, and a lot of times they can't, or you don't want them to get up for different reasons, whether they're just really seriously ill or in really bad abdominal pain, or they're maybe a little altered or unsteady and you don't want them to get up. But you still have to listen to lung sounds. You still have to check for CVA tenderness. You still have to do a back exam sometimes, try to assess their muscle strength and things. So it gets a little harder in the hospital setting than in the outpatient setting. And that wasn't something I even thought about or was prepared for. Obviously, when you work in the hospital, you are going to have less opportunity to run out if you need to go do an errand or something. It's not like in the outpatient setting when the patients come in on a certain schedule, and at lunch, if you need to, you could run out and do something, and your car is just a few steps out the door. This, you have to like make your way all the way down to the parking garage, wherever that may be. In some hospitals, it's quite far away. But even if you could get to your car and leave, you could get a patient assigned to you at any time, or something could go wrong with one of the patients that you've already seen. So essentially, you really cannot leave the hospital once you arrive there until your shift is over. And then probably finally, one of the last cons the things that's been bothering me about working in the hospitals is that just dealing with a large hospital system, there's a lot more emails that you have to go through all the time, and a lot more modules, training modules that are always coming your way. I can't tell you how many modules I've done, and they just keep coming. And that may be specific to just this particular hospital, but I tend to think probably not. I think all of these big entities probably have trainings like this that you have to keep up all the time. And so that's a bit annoying, in the outpatient world, for the most part, that you don't have that going on. The things I love about the hospital is it's so dynamic, right? It's not like when you work in outpatient, you come in and you go to your office and you go to the exam room 1, and then maybe back to your office and then exam room 2. If you're lucky, you may walk to the bathroom or to the break room. But for the most part, you just are in this little narrow area, and scene does not change all day long. In the hospital, we are going all over. Most of the time, we're going from our office, which is several floors above the ER. Most of the time, you're going up and down between the ER and your office. But sometimes you do have to go to the different towers. So you get a lot of opportunities to walk around and have a change of scenery and run into new people. And that's kind of cool. That keeps it a little bit more interesting. And of course, the resources that you have in inpatient are so great. If you want to order a lab, some tests you want, some imaging, or if you want to order a consult, it's so easy to order, and most of the time get them pretty quickly. I know sometimes an outpatient, you're just like, God, if I could just have a cardiologist read this EKG just so I have peace of mind of what I'm reading is correct, or if I could just get a quick X-ray or even a CBC or a CMP back while the patient is there so we can formulate a plan would be so helpful. But most of the time that doesn't happen in outpatient settings. So inpatient, it's nice. So you need some information, pretty much you can get it quickly. I also love that when you work in the hospital, for the most part, when your shift is done and you leave, you got your charting done and you go home, you are done, right? Somebody else has the patient. They are being taken care of. They are being monitored, and nurses are watching them, and the next shift is coming on and going to be taking over this patient's care. So you can go home and just forget about it. I mean, yes, you're going to think about certain patients, wondering how they're doing, and Sometimes you might even check in online to see the status of the patient or look at a lab result, but that's just out of curiosity to satisfy yourself. You don't have to, and there's no obligation to do that. And so that makes it very freeing. When you are off, you are off. And then along those same lines, if you want to take vacation, it is so nice. You can take vacation and you don't have to worry about things stacking up in your inbox or having to reschedule a whole bunch of patients. It's just being taken care of, and you just go and enjoy. And you come back, you just pick up with the next shift. So that is really super nice, and I love that about the inpatient setting. And I also do love the different schedules in inpatient. Like I said, I'm probably not a fan of the 7 on, 7 off, but for some people that really works and they love having a whole week off. And then if you take a week's PTO, then you could have 3 weeks where you could go do a long trip or something. And then some hospitals, may work like 4 on and 3 off and do some kind of alternating thing. But with those 12-hour shifts, you have the opportunity to be a little bit more flexible with your schedule. So that leads me to the question that I teased earlier about, do I like inpatient? Am I happy that I made the decision to go inpatient, or am I really missing the outpatient setting? And I have to say that I'd have to vote inpatient. I'm kind of liking inpatient setting. I'm still learning, and there's so much that I don't know. And so it is overwhelming at times. I'm having to do a lot of studying, but I just like the really collegial environment of working in inpatient and knowing that not everything rests on your shoulders. And I just love the flexibility of being able to work PRN in the hospital. I really find that to be great because I don't have any kind of regular expectations of me and how much I'm going to work, but I can go through and kind of pick up shifts on a fairly regular basis when I want to. I do like the dynamics of it. I like the feeling of being able to move around the hospital and be in different settings. And I kind of sometimes have that thought where I'm like a real provider now, provider in the hospital walking around in a white coat. It's kind of silly, but I do have that thought from time to time. But I also have the thought that cracks me up. When I was in outpatient, I used to always be frustrated. Patients would come back from being in the hospital, and there was like one test that really would have been nice if they had gotten done that would help us zero in on the root cause of the problems they've been having. But they would come back and that test wasn't done. And I would be so frustrated. And I'm like, why do they just not do XYZ when they're in their hospital and kind of get to the bottom of their problems so we can get it solved? And so I would say that all of the time, and I'd be so irritated and annoyed with people in the hospital. But now that I'm on the other side, I realize that from the hospital's standpoint, the providers in the hospital, we're trying to stabilize the patient. We are trying to address the immediate need of what is happening, whether it's an exacerbation or just some symptoms that are too acute to be handled in the outpatient setting. And we're just trying to get a handle on them and get those managed. Obviously, do some testing and imaging to find out what the cause is of the immediate problem so we can solve that and get the patient stabilized so that they're nice and stable and can go home and then have further testing in the outpatient, less expensive setting to figure out what is wrong. So I definitely see it from both sides, and I feel strongly that each side is right. But obviously, these things are opposed to each other. And so I feel like that is the never-ending story in our healthcare system, that people are being bounced back and forth, and they kind of get a Band-Aid put on, and then they come back to primary care, and then primary care is having difficulty getting tests and consults done because insurance isn't approving it, or because the specialist is so backed up that the patient can't get in for months. And so, we're doing our best to manage them, and then things get out of whack and they go back in the hospital and kind of back and forth. So I think now seeing things from the inpatient setting, it really magnifies how many problems there are in our healthcare system. And that is ultimately troubling and bothersome and brings up a whole other issues. But I think just the work in and of itself overall, I really enjoy inpatient. So if you're somebody out there who has always worked outpatient and you're looking at potentially going inpatient, whether you have an opportunity or you're just starting to look for opportunities, I would encourage you to take that leap. It's been interesting to expand my medical knowledge and to learn things a different way and to relearn things I had forgotten So I think it can be a great thing for your career. If you are somebody who is thinking about making a transition from one specialty to another, but you are not quite sure how to get started, where to look for those opportunities, or even how to prepare yourself to work in that specialty so you can do a good job, then I have a video you might be interested in. I'll link it here, and it can give you some good tips and help you figure out how to transition to a new specialty. If you have an idea for a video you'd like to see, like Maria, then please leave me a message down in the comment section. Thanks for joining me. Take care, stay sane, and I'll see you next time on the Medicine Couch. Bye.